Josh Allen is building a resume that, at a minimum, puts him in the conversation of being the best dual threat quarterback in NFL history. I'm breaking that down and more today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Well, folks, welcome in. I want to explore the idea that Josh Allen has firmly entered the conversation as the best, if not one of the best, dual threat quarterbacks in NFL history. So I'm going to break all of that down and get into some other Josh Allen topics today, including some of his offseason work, man coverage, drawing defensive pass interference. I want to talk about that, and I want to close out with an idea that was really kind of presented to me regarding the Mount Rushmore series that I did and the conflict that I found with the interior offensive line. So a loaded show, a lot of different topics, but I think the central theme is going to very much be Josh Allen, and of course the lead topic being his status as one of the greats already when it comes to dual threat quarterback production. So let's get into it. Warren Sharp on X about a week or so ago put out a tweet that shared the quantity of rushing touchdowns from the 1 yard line since 2021 by player. And I was excited to look through this because I wanted to see where Josh Allen slotted. There's a narrative out there that Josh Allen gets a bunch of rushing touchdowns, but it's just quarterback sneaks from the 1 yard line. It's not really that significant. He's just a touchdown vulture on the goal line. So this graphic was really cool. I wanted to see where Josh Allen was. And so I look at the top of the list and you see somebody who you'd expect, and that's Jalen Hurts, the Eagles quarterback. He's got 22 rushing touchdowns from the 1 yard line since 2021. Second place is Jamal Williams, running back. He's got 14. That's a pretty big drop off from 1 to 2. All right, you scan down the list. Joe Mixon's third with 12. 11, Derrick Henry, Ezekiel Elliott. 10, James Conner and Josh Jacobs. 9, Gus Edwards. 8, Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler, Christian McCaffrey. That's the end of the graphic. There was a big omission. Well, not really. He just didn't fit the criteria. It's Josh Allen. And Josh Allen's got tons of rushing touchdowns. But the idea that his rushing touchdowns are just a bunch of quarterback sneaks from the 1, not true. Not true at all. Not true at all. Josh Allen didn't appear on the graphic. Big time narrative buster. He's not a touchdown vulture. He has 7 rushing touchdowns since 2021 from the 1 yard line. 5 of those actually came in 2023. Oh, by the way, Josh Allen has 6 rushing touchdowns from outside the 10. And so all of this led to a bigger thought that I've had and something I've seen discussed on social media, and it's where Josh Allen ranks when it comes to dual threat quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. Dual threat means passing and running. And so let's examine these rushing stats. Josh Allen, we'll start with touchdowns. Josh Allen has 53 rushing touchdowns for his career. That's the second most ever. Second most all-time already. when it comes to rushing touchdowns for a quarterback in the history of the NFL. He's got 53. Number 1 is Cam Newton with 75. Josh Allen, number 2 at 53. Then it's Steve Young at number 3 with 43. So a comfortable gap between Josh Allen at 2 with 53 and Steve Young at 3 with 43. Oh, by the way, Michael Vick, 8th with 36 rushing touchdowns. Randall Cunningham, 9th with 35 rushing touchdowns. Both of those guys over 140 games played. Josh Allen, 53 rushing touchdowns in 94 games played. And within the next 3 or 4 seasons, maybe 2, if he replicates the 15 rushing touchdowns he has this past season, Josh Allen's going to be number 1 all time. Barring injury or anything like that, he's going to be the number 1 touchdown rusher in NFL history when it comes to quarterbacks. And he's currently outpacing Cam Newton in terms of touchdowns per game. Again, Cam Newton, number 1 at 75. Josh Allen, number 2 at 53. So that's a big deal. And again, Josh Allen, 94 games. Michael Vick, 36 rushing touchdowns, over 140 games played. Josh Allen's already got basically 20 more rushing touchdowns than Michael Vick in 50 less games. When it comes to rushing yards, Josh Allen, 3,611 rushing yards. That's 8th best all time, or the 8th most all time. Michael Vick, number 1, 6,109. Cam Newton, number 2, just a little over 5,600 yards. Russell Wilson, number 3, 5,300 yards. Lamar Jackson, number 4, 5,258 yards. Randall Cunningham, number 5, 4,928. Steve Young, number 6, 4,239. Number 7 is Fran Tarkenton at 3,674. So this year, Josh Allen, again, barring injury, he's going to pass Fran Tarkenton. I mean, he might do that in week 1. I think he'll pass Steve Young in 2025. I think he's about 3 years away from being in the top 5 all time when it comes to just rushing yards. So already number 2 when it comes to rushing touchdowns, number 8 when it comes to rushing yards, and in a very short period of time, he's going to be even higher. So he's right there with the greats when it comes to rushing volume or rushing production. And certainly the touchdowns stand out in a big way. And as we've already established, they're not just quarterback sneaks from the 1. They're anything but that. In fact, over the last 3 years, Josh Allen has 1 less rushing touchdown from 10 yards out than he does from 1 yard out. Incredible. But where Josh Allen is superior to any other quarterback that's in this dual threat conversation, it's the passing. Josh Allen is a far, far superior passer than any of these guys. Michael Vick, Randall Cunningham, Lamar Jackson, Cam Newton. Josh Allen is producing passing yards at a rate that those guys can't touch and haven't touched. Here's some data courtesy of at Uber Hansen on X, a good account if you want some Bills nuggets. Tweeted out, there have been 3 seasons in NFL history where a quarterback finished with over 4,250 passing yards and over 500 rushing yards. Every single one of them belonged to Josh Allen. 2021, 2022, and 2023. That's it. None of those guys ever done that. So it's Josh Allen for the last 4 seasons has topped this statistical milestone of 4,000 yards passing, 500 rushing yards. These other guys don't do that and didn't do that. The passing piece of this equation is really where Josh Allen sets himself apart. He's far superior with passing, and his rushing impact is outpacing these guys. So maybe it's premature to call Josh Allen the greatest dual threat quarterback in NFL history. but he is inarguably building the resume to be that, and is absolutely knocking on the door and is absolutely in the conversation. And it's only a matter of time to me before it becomes very clear that he is the guy when it comes to dual threat quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. All right, folks, we got more Josh Allen conversation coming up here on the other side of it. I want to talk about some man coverage data that has recently come out. I want to talk about some penalty stuff. I want to talk about a throwing session that he had. We got a lot to unpack, so be sure to stick with me. Folks, there's nothing quite like being at the ballpark taking in a Major League Baseball game during the summer. Well, if you want to do that, check out GameTime. GameTime is an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. So you can make that last-minute decision to go to the ballpark. They have killer last-minute deals. They give you all-in prices on tickets, a view from your seat, and a lowest price guarantee. GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. So snag the tickets without the stress. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDNFL for $20 off. Download the GameTime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. One of the talking points that has come out of the 2023 season regarding Josh Allen and the Bills offense was the amount of man coverage that the Bills faced. They faced the highest percentage of man coverage of any team in the NFL, second most total snaps against man coverage. And this is surprising, I think, for a lot of people, because typically with quarterbacks that run like Josh Allen, you don't want to play man coverage because then you don't have as many eyes in the backfield. And, even man coverage to an extent makes some of the reads easier. And so you're wondering, well, why in the world did Josh Allen face so much man coverage? Well, I've talked about this on the podcast. I think the leading reason why is the lack of man beaters at wide receiver, guys that can separate from man coverage last year. I think that was a major problem with the group, and I don't think teams respected those receivers and were willing to play man-on-man and kind of dictate terms a little bit. They weren't afraid of the matchups. And so Josh Allen, when it just comes to raw statistical data, passing the football against man coverage, at a completion percentage of 57%, that was 15th in the NFL. Adjusted net yards per attempt of 6.73, which is 13th in the NFL. So kind of middle of the pack when it comes to some of those numbers. But the rushing numbers really do stand out. He had the most yards off scrambles facing man coverage, 4 rushing touchdowns, which is double number 2 when it comes to man coverage and scrambles. And also very interesting that the lowest percentage of Josh Allen's throws in facing man coverage were to his first read of any quarterback in the NFL, which I think speaks to some of the issues with matchups and guys being able to beat man coverage. But a graphic recently came out, and if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to put it on the screen right now. This comes courtesy of Field Vision Sports that offers the EPA, total EPA, so total expected points added versus man coverage. Josh Allen, number 1 in the NFL last season, 85.7 expected points added. Dak Prescott, number 2, and then at 85. And then you see a big drop-off. Brock Purdy, 64. Tua's number 4 at 44. Then you get down to, is it Patrick Mahomes at 31? So Josh Allen, teams really did play with fire with that. They disregarded the receivers that the Bills had and wanted to play a certain way, but Josh Allen certainly made them pay. And so I think this is an interesting layer to this conversation that we've kind of been having off and on this offseason about facing man coverage. And it's a good data point. And I think a data point like EPA gets you to a deeper level of discussion than just, okay, these are raw statistical output. EPA brings in context that is important. And so go ahead and play man coverage against Josh Allen. He led the league in total EPA against man coverage last year, and I think he could arguably be in better shape to be even more effective against it in 2024 and beyond. So I wanted to talk about that. I thought that was an interesting nugget that recently came through that builds off of some things that we've been talking about on this podcast. I also want to mention that some video came out over the weekend of Josh Allen and a bunch of his weapons having a throwing session in Tennessee. Looks like it was at Vanderbilt University. You would think with Dawson Knox getting married, a bunch of teammates being in a centralized location, that they took advantage of the opportunity to get a throwing session in. And the players that were discernible from a very brief clip that we got a chance to see, well, I saw Curtis Samuel, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid, plenty of other players there as well. And this is just stuff you love to see. And it feels like we haven't seen much of this when it comes to Josh Allen. I've questioned it for sure. And that's why I wanted to at least bring this up on today's episode to highlight that this happened. And Gabe Davis also, through some of these criticisms that have been out there that Josh Allen doesn't throw with his receivers during the offseason, Gabe Davis, through Tim Graham, actually confirmed that it has happened in past off seasons. The cameras just weren't on, and they just weren't choosing to broadcast it to the world that they were doing it. But Gabe Davis would have no reason to not be honest about that. So bottom line here, something you love to see. It's really important, especially this offseason with all the newness when it comes to the receiving core and the offense for Josh Allen, that he's got to build chemistry with these guys, and doing so and developing trust and timing and understanding each other's body language is really critical for Josh Allen, especially this year with so many new players around him. And the fact that they have to hit the ground running. Like last year, you felt like maybe the offseason was slow out of the gate, and it was disappointing because there was continuity with everything, right? With the coaching staff, with the weapons, and then you stumbled out of the gate. Now, you certainly tried to incorporate some new pieces of your operation with Dalton Kincaid and a couple of new guards and some different players in the backfield. But for the most part, you get Gabe Davis, you had Dawson Knox, you had Stefon Diggs. Kind of expected that to be good from the outset with Ken Dorsey returning as the offensive coordinator. Wasn't the case. And so with less familiarity, I have a level of concern that the Bills offense could be a little slow out of the gate. And I think that would not be ideal. It's a tough schedule. Expectations are high. And this passing game needs to hit the ground running from week one. And so stuff like this only helps that to be true. So wanted to highlight that, wanted to bring it to everyone's attention because this has been a criticism of Josh Allen in past off seasons, and wanted to put that out there as well. One more thing that I want to talk about regarding Josh Allen and his weapons is forcing defensive pass interference. When you're on offense, do you get flags thrown? Do you draw defensive pass interference? And boy, oh boy, did the Bills stink at that last year. This also comes courtesy of Warren Sharp, who you can follow on X at Sharp Football. He put out the list of, the rankings of defensive pass interference penalties drawn by pass offenses during the 2023 regular season. And dead last, the Buffalo Bills with 3. The Jaguars lead the way with 19, the Cowboys 15, Packers, Seahawks, Bengals 13, Chargers 12. I mean, you kind of see most of the teams are 9 and up. The Bills had 3. A measly 3. And you felt this watching the team last year, like even on some of the interceptions that Josh Allen threw, some of the incomplete passes, you're like, man, if you could just fight for the ball, just show some ball skills. And, DPI is as good as a completion, right? Like it's a spot foul. It's a great thing that can happen for you. The Bills only forced 3. I talked about it a bit in season, but I can never really validate it. But this graphic absolutely validated it. It's super frustrating. And it's another reason why the wide receiver room needed to be overhauled. Guys not fighting for the ball. It's one of those situations where when a quarterback throws the ball, they need to have belief in one of two things happening, that you're going to catch it or you're going to make sure that the other team doesn't catch it. And I just don't think you saw the same fight for the ball from the Bills wide receivers last year as you typically see from receivers in the NFL. So I looked up some more information on this. Curtis Samuel drew 4 defensive pass interference penalties last year. 4, which is more than the entire Bills team did. Stefon Diggs on his 150-something targets, 2. He drew 2, and Gabe Davis drew 1. Marquez Valdes-Scantling on 55 targets last year drew 2. So, I mean, Curtis Samuel by himself last year drew more pass interference flags than Stefon Diggs and Gabe Davis combined. If you add Samuel and Marquez Valdes-Scantling together, you have double what Diggs and Davis were able to generate last year. I'm excited to see the competition in this wide receiver room, whether it's being willing to fight for the ball in those moments and draw flags, running the for love of the game routes with intention, routes that you're not going to get the ball, but you got to run it a certain way to get other guys open for the spacing to work. I think the competition in this wide receiver core is going to help with a lot of the frustrations that we had last season, whether it's beating man coverage, whether it's drawing coverage with being intentional with how you run every single route the same way, or fighting for the football. There's questions. I get it. There's questions. But I like how this could and should lead to better dynamics in those 3 areas that I just outlined. All right, folks, more to get to here. I want to talk a little bit about the center Mount Rushmore, the interior offensive line Mount Rushmore that we did the last couple of days. I have some new ideas that were presented to me, and I want to build off of that. So we'll talk about that here on the other side of it, so be sure to stick with me. All right, one other nugget here before we get into the interior offensive line, or we revisit the interior offensive line Mount Rushmore conversation. Gable Steveson was photographed working out with somebody you probably heard of, Aaron Donald. If you're watching on YouTube, it's on the screen. Wanted to share this picture of Gable Steveson working out with Aaron Donald at University of Minnesota. Of course, Gable Steveson, the Bills rolling the dice, signing him to a contract, never played football, but a highly accomplished wrestler, a gold medalist wrestler. Of course, we know Sean McDermott, his affinity for wrestlers and the athleticism that Gable Steveson has, and working with an Ed Oliver, all that stuff, right? You know the storyline here, but I think it's so cool that he's working out with Aaron Donald. I don't know the extent of it, if it was a one-time thing, if it's on several times a week. I don't know the extent. And I don't want to get crazy, but this is really cool to me. I mean, Aaron Donald's the best defensive lineman of this era of football, and obviously an outlier in terms of size. And in terms of that, like undersized, super athletic interior defensive lineman, like you feel like Gable Stevenson's working with the right guy. And listening to some interviews of Gable Steveson since he was, signed by the Bills, you can tell he wants to be great. He's a highly driven person. I mean, you don't get to the places that he's gotten, right? An Olympic medalist, right? In an individual sport like wrestling. Like you don't do that without being a highly driven, highly skilled, wired the right way person. I mean, to be the best in the world at the thing that you do, I mean, that says a lot. And again, I'm not getting crazy. I don't have expectations for Gable Steveson, but boy, oh boy, does this make it even more fascinating, knowing, just kind of getting little bits and pieces of what he's trying to do to make this work, and listening to him and seeing this. I just think it's really cool and wanted to bring it to your attention. All right, the last thing I want to talk about today is kind of revisiting conversation we had on Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. I did the Mount Rushmore conversation where I built the Mount Rushmore for the Buffalo Bills all time at every single position. And on the Tuesday show, I did the offense, and I talked about how challenging the interior offensive line was. And I don't know why I didn't think of it, but some of you guys did. And Steven in our Discord channel, which you can be part of our Discord channel by subscribing to the Locked On Bills subtext community. Super cool thing that we have going on. One-on-one text messaging with me. I send out mass text messages to everybody from time to time, give you my first thoughts on all the Bills news. We do a lot of interactive stuff. Discord, a lot of cool stuff there. So if you want to be part of the Locked On Bills subtext community, there's a link to join in today's show notes and everyday show notes. But Steven's in there, and he's like, Joe, did you think about just having a Mount Rushmore for centers and a Mount Rushmore for guards and not trying to put interior offensive line together? And it's like, you know what? I really should have done that. That would have made this a lot easier because I thought there were so many guards that were worthy. And by having to kind of lump in Kent Hull with interior offensive line, it made things funky. So let me present to you my revisited Mount Rushmores for the interior offensive line as I now separate them into guard and center. So for guard, we already kind of really talked about this. It's Billy Shaw, Joe DeLamielleure, Hall of Famers, Reuben Brown, Jim Richter. And then I would have Richie Incognito as an honorable mention. And if you want to do this thing where we put in Joe DeLamielleure and Reggie McKenzie as a pair, all right, cool. I'm with you. Reggie McKenzie certainly very worthy of the conversation. The hard thing about Mount Rushmore is you can only pick 4. But I've taken some creative liberties, and I say if you want to put those guys in as a tandem, sure. But that should be the guard conversation. For center, I think this opens up a whole new world of talking points. So I think the Bills Mount Rushmore for center, Kent Hull, obviously, we talked about him on the Tuesday show. But the other 3 on there with him, L.B. Miller, 1961 to 1969, drafted in 61, spent all 9 seasons with the Bills, Pro Bowler in 65, never missed a game, started 123 of a possible 126 contests. Of course, the Bills center for the 64 and 65 AFL championship teams. Eric Wood, also part of the Mount Rushmore for Bills center, 2009 to 2017, Pro Bowler in 2015, impact starter across 9 seasons, 120 games. His career cut short, obviously, due to the injury, but was a pillar of the organization for nearly a decade. And you got to think that if E. Wood didn't have that neck injury, you're talking about 12, 13, 14-year starter, perhaps. And so definitely part of this Mount Rushmore. And then the last one I picked was Mitch Morse. Mitch Morse, 2019 to 2023, Pro Bowler in 2022, 77 starts. And this is what I'll say about Mitch Morse. Mitch Morse was the center for the Buffalo Bills during the greatest stretch of offensive football the team has ever seen. And I think you talk about Josh Allen's ascension as an elite player. I think a stabilizing player like Mitch Morse as the center, to be the glue piece for the offensive line, to be the leader of the offensive line, to help with protection calls, to be on the same page with Josh was really, really critical. And so I think Mitch Morse deserving of that the final Mount Rushmore spot. I'd say Jerry Ostrowski is an honorable mention for me. I think he's just one of the most underappreciated Bills of all time. Multiple seasons as a starter at center, guard, and tackle. I don't know that there's another offensive lineman that could say that they were a primary starter for the same team for multiple seasons at guard, center, and tackle. And the Bills had some good rushing offenses in the late 90s, kind of when Jerry O was part of the mix. So I'd put him as an honorable mention. So there you have it, folks. A lot of random topics today. We talked Josh Allen and a lot of dynamics there. We talked Gable Steveson, the defensive pass interference, penalties being drawn. We revisited the center Mount Rushmore conversation. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope you'll come back tomorrow. I think I want to have a Sean McDermott conversation tomorrow, and talk about some thoughts that I have there, and have recently, with 2 other people, taken the time to kind of rank head coaches. And so probably want to spend tomorrow thinking through some of that with you here on the podcast. So come on back. Make sure that you take a moment to subscribe. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.